Welcome to our drawing Enterprise 20 Dial Plan Build, Dial Plan End User Training Part 5. Part 5 looks at mobility and roaming. How do things work when you roam to other sites? You are roaming when you use a soft phone like Cisco IP communicator at a different site. You are roaming when you use extension mobility to log into a phone at a different site. You are roaming if you take your phone to a different site and plug it in, or if you use a wireless phone at a different site. You are roaming when you use Mobile Connect, also called single number reach, to ring lines on different phones when people call you. Not everyone calls this roaming, but we do. Does dialing work like at your site or like at the roaming site? Does 911 still work? Of course it does. Does call forwarding work like at your site or like at the roaming site? Do speed dials work when you roam? What about Mobile Connect, single number reach? Does it work when you are roaming? What about call lists? Can you still return calls with one-click dialing? So many questions. What about different kinds of roaming devices? Extension mobility profiles, soft phones like CIPC, wireless phones, or even normal desktop phones. Do all roaming devices work the same way? We'll answer all of these questions. We'll explore mobility for user Chloe Campbell's. Chloe works in the Montreal office and has an extension mobility profile she uses with her work phone in Montreal and for roaming. CIPC for roaming, wireless and desktop phones work the same way, and a remote destination profile for single number reach. We've configured the lines on Chloe's CIPC and extension mobility profile exactly the same. When at her home site or roaming, Chloe can use CIPC or extension mobility, or both, whatever is most convenient. Let's see what happens when Chloe roams to the Halifax site. Chloe can see that her CIPC or other roaming phone is roaming because it says device in roaming location. The message displays for a short while when the phone starts up, so watch closely. If the message doesn't display at all, then the phone is not roaming and will behave like at your home site for all calls including 911. That's why we don't allow 911 calls from soft phones like CIPC. An extension mobility profile lets you log in to a phone to get your lines, speed dials, services, and other phone features. Here is a phone in Halifax that Chloe will use. You can see the Halifax extension. These speed dials are configured for dialing from Halifax. Press the Services button to log in. Select the Extension Mobility service and log in using your username and password. Press the Submit soft key. After logging in, the phone has Chloe's Montreal extensions. The speed dials are Chloe's speed dials configured in Montreal. There's no message device in roaming location. We know we are roaming because the phone we just logged into is a Halifax phone. Notice that the line appearances are identical on these devices. These lines are shared lines as discussed in earlier training. If Chloe has both devices in use, calls to Chloe will ring on the lines on both devices. Mobile Connect lets you ring other numbers, called remote destinations, when you get a call at work. Remote destinations are always external numbers. Chloe's cell phone, 514-460-0000, is configured as her remote destination. Chloe configured this in Montreal. This is a local Montreal 10-digit number. This is what it looks like in the user web pages. Remote destinations are called alternate numbers in the user web pages on the Home tab. Configure the number and check the Reach Me Anywhere checkbox. You need to configure a 9 for remote destinations, just like for dialing and call forwarding. Some users can add more than one remote destination. Let's test Mobile Connect. We'll call Chloe from Oakville. When we call Chloe at 8-573-6001, after a short time, her cell phone 514-460-0000 will also ring. Roaming is easy to understand. When roaming to another site, there are only two things to know. Calling works like at the roaming site. If Chloe roams to Halifax, then all calling, including from speed dials and call lists, works like at the roaming site, Halifax. Call forwarding works like at the home site for all conditions. If Chloe roams to Halifax, then all call forwarding works like at the Montreal site. Mobile Connect behaves like call forwarding. It doesn't matter how you are roaming, with extension mobility, soft phones, or desktop phones. Everything works like this. We'll look at dialing from a roaming device first. We have at the Halifax site, Chloe's CIPC with device mobility, Chloe's EM profile logged into a phone, and Halifax phones. Dialing from these different devices in Halifax is the same. The first thing to remember when roaming to another site, calling works like at the roaming site. If Chloe roams to Halifax, then all calling, including from speed dials and call lists, works like at the roaming site. When roaming in Halifax, Chloe can dial Halifax extension 7751 from both the roaming CIPC and EM profile. When roaming in Halifax, Chloe cannot dial Montreal extensions like 36002. She gets fast busy after dialing only 4 digits, because at Halifax we have 4-digit dialing. All phones can dial all internal numbers. We never doubted that. We tested dialing the Saskatoon 902 site anyways. Dialing 911 or 9911 always works like at the roaming site. Calls to 911 will route out the Halifax gateway. It's a success. When roaming in Halifax, 7-digit calls work like at the Halifax site. Calls to these numbers ring local Halifax phones. When roaming in Halifax, Chloe can dial Halifax local 10-digit numbers. When roaming in Halifax, Chloe can dial Halifax local 10-digit numbers, but cannot dial Montreal local 10-digit numbers. These numbers are long distance from Halifax and require a 1. When we dialed local area code 514 from Halifax, we got fast busy after 7 digits had been dialed. Why? At the Halifax site, the only local area codes allowed are 902 and 782. We did this to remove the delay from 7-digit dialing. So when you dial the first 7 digits, 9-514-4600, the CUCM thinks you are making a local 7-digit call. If there was a local 7-digit number, 514-4600, you'd connect to that phone. Is this really what we want? When at the Montreal site, local 7 and 10-digit patterns route to Montreal local numbers. When at the Halifax site, local 7 and 10-digit patterns route to Halifax local numbers. Is this confusing? It would be more confusing if it worked any other way. Local route groups direct calls out local gateways, which have site-specific behavior. Roaming users must dial based on the behavior of the PSTN at the roaming site. At Montreal, 902 calls are long distance. Dial using a 1. 514 calls are local. Don't use a 1. Conversely, at Halifax, 902 calls are local. Don't use a 1. 514 calls are long distance. Dial using a 1. When Chloe roams from Montreal to Halifax, she finds that she must dial 9, 1, 514, 555 1212 instead of 9, 514, 555 1212. We have no problems routing to global external patterns, long distance and international. The calls route out the Halifax gateway. Let's look at speed dials. Chloe has speed dials pointing to Montreal extensions. These don't work in Halifax because you can't dial these numbers. Speed dials pointing to Halifax numbers will work. When at the Halifax site, 7-digit speed dials will ring Halifax 7-digit numbers. If you program and use a speed dial in Montreal, then try to use the speed dial in Halifax, you may get a fast busy, or worse, a different party. When Chloe tries to use a 10-digit speed dial with local area code 514, she gets fast busy after 7 digits. This is the same behavior as for dialing the number outright. We get the same behavior from our call lists. We won't be able to return calls from local 7 or 10-digit Montreal numbers when roaming in Halifax. When at the Montreal site, speed dials and call list entries for local 7 and 10-digit patterns route to Montreal local numbers. When at the Halifax site, speed dials and call list entries for local 7 and 10-digit patterns route to Halifax local numbers. Montreal speed dials and call lists may not work. There's only so much we can do. The telephone numbering scheme is ancient and not built for roaming. We'll look at fixing these problems when our service providers upgrade the capabilities of our gateways. You are roaming when you use a soft phone like Cisco IP communicator at a different site. You are roaming when you use extension mobility to log into a phone at a different site. You are roaming if you take your phone to a different site and plug it in, or if you use a wireless phone at a different site. You are roaming when you use Mobile Connect, also called single number reach, to ring lines on different phones when people call you. Not everyone calls this roaming, but we do. When roaming to another site, there's only 2 things to know. Calling works like at the roaming site. If Chloe roams to Halifax, then all calling, including from speed dials and call lists, works like at the roaming site. Call forwarding works like at the home site for all conditions. If Chloe roams to Halifax, then all call forwarding works like at the Montreal site. Mobile Connect behaves like call forwarding. It doesn't matter how you are roaming. With extension mobility, soft phones, or desktop phones. Everything works like this. This drawing is continued in Dial Planned End User Training, Part 6. Part 6 looks at call forwarding when roaming. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe.